Hey friends, welcome to the Empowered Homes Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to grow strong families by connecting church and home. I'm in studio with Meg. Hey Meg.
Hey friends, how we doing today?
And on Zoom, we got special guests with us, two incredible men, Brian Smith and Ed Uszynski. They wrote a book on youth sports. We're going to get into that. And, you know, Meg, we always want to have a resource in front of our parents that is going to empower them at home. And so many of our parents are in the throes, in the trenches of youth sports and navigating those. And I'm super excited to have these guys with us so we can have a conversation about how Christian parents can navigate youth sports. And so you guys, Brian, we'll start with you. Share a little bit about yourself and your family and just kind of your background. And then Ed, you go next.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Brian Smith. I've been on staff with a sports ministry called Athletes in Action for 17 years now. I ran track and cross country at Wake Forest University in college. I've been married to my wife, Lindsay, for 20 years. We have 3 kids, one in high school, one in middle school, and one in elementary school. All of them play sports at some level. And I'm also the high school cross-country coach where all of our kids will eventually end up going to high school. So been in sports ministry and in and around sports basically my entire life.
And I'm Ed Uszynski, very similar to Brian. I've worked with Athletes in Action for 33 years. And my wife, Amy, and I just grew up totally immersed in the sports world, both playing collegiate level and beyond. I was my dad was a high school football coach in the Western Cleveland area. She was in a huge hockey family. So we're sports family. We got 4 kids. 3 in college, 1 in 9th grade. Been saying like, we got one more chance to try to get it right, you know. And after everything that went on with the first 3, so we're still right in the middle of the youth sports journey ourselves, and trying to do ministry to mostly college and professional athletes, but now trying to figure out what does it mean to do ministry with kids and in that space. And that's really what kind of took us on this journey ourselves.
Yeah, you know, for us, we've talked sports, me and Meg. Meg, kind of give a little bit of your background with sports for these guys and then kids as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I grew up playing basketball and softball, and I got to play softball in college and had incredible experience. But like many kids, I had some pretty overly passionate parents who had strong opinions from the sideline and instilled in me a hard work ethic, but also a huge fear in playing. And so it became something that wasn't so fun anymore. And so I love that we get to have this conversation because I know you all are going to address that and how parents can really balance between, you know, instilling hard work in our kids and team sports and what that brings, but also like, man, let's quit taking the fun out of sports, right?
Yeah. And you got kids who play?
Yes. And so then I have a 15-year-old who plays basketball, and then our daughter is 9 years old, and she plays volleyball. And so we are in this journey. Same with y'all.
Yeah, and you know, I played football and all the sports all through high school, played football in college, and I've got 3 kids, 8th grade football. I've got my daughter who's in cheer and volleyball, basketball. She plays everything, track, all the stuff. And then my youngest is in Pee Wee football right now, but he also is in basketball and baseball. And so all of us are sitting around in the table, and you guys on Zoom. Sports is a big part of all of our lives, and our listeners, I know, especially locally with our church here in Katy, Texas, there seems to be this sports-driven culture that we have. It's not just in Katy, but it's everywhere. We see it everywhere. And so I'm super excited about your book. It's called Away Game, The Christian Parent's Guide to Navigating Youth Sports. And so I wanted to kind of tee us up about just we're all entrenched in this culture of sports. So, Ed, will you just share just the heart behind what you put in this book? Like, where did this all come from? Because I think at some level we're all like, what are we doing here? As parents, like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And so give us your heart behind the kind of genesis of this.
Yeah. And in some ways, I mean, you already heard it, and we're all sharing in it, in the sense that we got immersed as parents of kids who were in sport culture. So it's one thing to go through it ourselves as athletes decades ago, but it's entirely another now to be trying to coach in the midst of it, to trying to parent in the midst of it, to watching other parents and what they're doing in the midst of it. And maybe 10 years ago, Brian and I just looked up and realized we needed an intervention, because we were becoming that parent that was putting pressure on our kids, and we knew we were doing it. We were the parent that was being driven by fear of this imagined future, that was being sold to us through what we're calling the youth sport industrial complex. And then all of a sudden, youth sports becomes this $40 billion industry around us. And that has implications. It brings its own value system along with it. And we realized we were being discipled. We were being trained by that system in a way that was probably not going to be best for our kids. And we realized we were contributing to it in ways that we didn't like. So we started to look around and just say, where can we get help? And realize there really hadn't been that much, at least a decade ago, and there still really hasn't been that much now, written specifically for Christians who are trying to navigate and become and live like Christians and train their kids to be Christians in a system that's actually doing the opposite. In a lot of ways, when you really look at it, it's training them to be the opposite of what you want them to be and for us to be. So that's how we got started. And we just said, maybe it's time for us to take all these years of experience we've had listening to college athletes, being college athletes, hanging out among parents and having these conversations, and let's put it into book form and get the conversation started.
Yeah. And, Brian, let's talk for a minute about emotions, expectations, fears that parents have. And being that parent that had an experience that wasn't, the best. And so wanting to do it differently, but also like there are very real emotions that come up when your kid is playing sports, and you all of a sudden are like, what is happening and why am I so attached to this? And is this healthy or is this unhealthy? Or maybe they're not even evaluating that, right? And so let's talk specifically to parents about, how do they kind of work through that and identify those emotions and really like an appropriate involvement in their children's athletic journey?
Yeah. I was just coming home from my freshman son's football game a couple weeks ago, and I was frustrated that, it was a blowout and he wasn't getting a whole lot of playing time. And my wife on the car ride home looked at me and she was like, "Are you okay? You just seemed really angry in the stands today." And I had to do some processing of like, I really thought that when the game was out of hand, he was going to get some playing time, and he didn't. And so I've gotten into this rhythm of just trying to do some post-game processing in my own heart of like, man, why did this frustrate me? Or why did I want to say this, whether I said it or not? Why did I want to do that? And so I'm by no means an expert at this, and it helps when you have a spouse who's willing to call you out on your junk and who knows you well enough to know when you seem a little edgy and a little off and can ask good questions. But I want to grow in doing the hard work of just that car ride home with myself. I mean, maybe we can talk about that later with our own kids, but just myself, like what was going on in my heart during the game. I want to be a good self-scout of my own heart during the game so that I can process some of these emotions and dig deeper into why I was feeling what I was feeling. That's on the back end. On the front end, I've done this a few times and found it to be really helpful. I pick some games where I'm just silent and I choose not to say anything. That makes me really aware of, why do I want to say this? Why are so many people yelling this and that? And it allows you to see pretty quickly that our kids, the reason they're anxious in sport and the reason a lot of them are playing under fear instead of freedom, which is what we want our kids to play, is under freedom. we're creating this toxic, crazy environment, usually well-intentioned parents, but we're just screaming our heads off. And it's just creating an unhealthy environment for our kid. And so I'm just trying to like pick games where I'm silent so I can do, again, the self-processing of what would go on in my heart. Overlaying all of that, one of the things that I think we could get better just as a church in this space is doing this in community. What does it look like for us as parents to grow in this space? It means we need more. My wife's name is Lindsay. We need more Lindsays around us in the games and in the car ride home saying, hey, don't say that. Mm-hmm. Hey, when you did this, I saw your kid look up and So we need to be in community where we have given each other permission to call us out when we are stepping out of line with not just what it looks like to be a good parent, but what does it look like to act Christianly in the space. And I don't have community here where I live where we've established that. That would be my goal, though. I want people who are in it with me, who are showing up together at games, and we're getting better because we're calling each other out and calling each other up.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing. You know, I've got two examples personally. Like, early in our marriage, we were broke, and I was trying to make extra income, and so I got invited to be on a referee crew for Friday nights in Texas football, and so I was on a pretty big crew, and it was so fun, and I learned a lot, and I did it for years, and you know, I was joke I'd still be doing it if our lives weren't busy, but man, I promise you, I was called everything you can think of from the sidelines from parents. Just the most irrational things that was just absolutely insane. And then now, fast forward, you know, I'm coaching my son's Pee Wee football team, and I have to be the one to yell at our parents, like, shut your mouths. Like, the only thing you're allowed to do is to cheer. Like, you can't, like, and I find myself in this weird situation where, like, wow, I don't understand what you're thinking. Like, we got a 15-yard penalty last week because a parent was in the ref's ear, like, came up on the field, and I had to push. He's a grandparent, and I had to push him out and be like, you need to get off the sidelines. What are you doing? And so this passion and this, you know, I love that you said we need those people around us that can pull us off. It doesn't need to be the coaches. But when it comes to the doing that, how do you communicate with someone that is not a believer? Because I feel like part of my role when I'm with my kids' teams or in the stands is like, I'm a de-escalator. I'm a voice of reason. I can call out some dads and some different stuff. As a coach, I can call out parents. But it's oftentimes like those parents who are non-believers that just I can't expect them to act a certain way that they don't understand. What advice would you give the Christian parents who are sitting in the stands and they're hearing all these toxic verbal cussing and just language, and like, how do I address that from the stands with grace, with love? Because it's hard. There's times where, man, I just want to punch a guy. I can't do that because I'm representing Jesus, you know?
Such a good model.
Well, yeah. It's funny that you ask it like that, though. And I don't want to, I think we can answer the question, but that's not the problem. The problem, as is so often the case, is there's a ton of Christian parents that are up in the stands.
Exactly, yeah.
Who haven't done the self-reflection that Brian talked about. And that's a really disturbing work to do, to see how much anger I have inside of me that I'm giving myself permission to take out at the game, that I have fears that are just unacknowledged, that are dominating this moment, fears about the future, fear about something that happened in the past that I don't want to see happen again, that I have my own regrets. You know, there's a lot of self-work that needs to be done for me to get myself right. And if we just had enough people that were conscious that way in the stands, and that we're actually allowing this part of their inner light to become sanctified, which again, that's a Christian word, right? That it's set apart and it's transformed, it's renewed, it's turned into something different. It's not being conformed to the way everybody else is doing it. that would make some of those guys and women that are standing out for just being completely out of their minds, they would look like outliers then. Mm. And at some point there would be some social pressure to not be that anymore. Okay. If there was a, a coalition of people that were
a contrast.
Yeah, there was a contrast. There's not so I always want to start with the church. I feel like the Apostle Paul always started with the church. Like, you figure out how to be the people of God in the midst of a broken and dark culture, and let God take care of the rest as far as changing and challenging other people. Let your own witness, your own testimony, your own way of walking be the message for other people. And we don't have enough of that. So again, even going back to why do we write this book? Because we want to be the difference. We want to make it look different. And that's not been the case enough in the cultural moment that we find ourselves in. Once I'm actually living that way and I actually am showing a contrast, and maybe there's a coalition of people that are that way, then maybe out of relationship, I can go and talk to a guy. And I've had these experiences too, where I've tried to have these conversations. And always the issue is not so much behavior at the game. It's what's actually going on in their own life that's behind that. Again, there's always some angst, there's some anger, there's some fear, there's some unresolved thing in people's lives. They're just giving themselves permission because there's nobody to tell them not to. They're just taking it out at the youth sport events. We do it at professional events. That's the other thing that Brian and I talk about all the time, that we've in a sense professionalized 6-year-old soccer. And part of that professionalization is that we act on the same way on those sidelines as we do, at the Lions and the Ravens game. That just happened last night on Monday Night Football. Everybody's screaming and yelling and screaming at the refs and cussing and doing whatever they want to do and getting drunk and just kind of letting themselves go crazy. Well, we're acting the same way at a 6-year-old game, and there's something wrong with that. So where are the Christians that say, here's a way to actually be super competitive and pursue excellence? Again, we're not talking about becoming soft. No. This is actually a harder path. We're going to control ourselves as we're pursuing excellence and giving our kids opportunity, but we're actually going to focus on other metrics and not just their performance in terms of their overall growth. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And that's such a good perspective, especially our listeners, the Christian parents who, we get to set that tone. I tell our parents all the time, I'll email before the game of hey, let's be the loudest cheers for both teams. Let's set the example of we're not going to yell or fight or do any of that stuff. And it's a huge thing. But I know Meg's got a question, but before we move on, I just, as you're talking, I was thinking of, the parent who is sitting there going, I don't want my kids in sports because I don't want them around this. And what would you say to that parent? Because I would argue, man, youth sports, it changed my life. It kept me on track, and I learned so much about life through it, and I want my kids to. But I know so many parents who are like, I'm not going to put up with it, so we're not going to do anything. What encouragement would you give those parents before we move on?
Yeah, the part of the beauty and the brokenness that is youth sports is it really is it's an incredible training ground. If we do the hard work as parents of living by a different scoreboard than the rest of the world, it is an incredible training ground where our kids can build the resiliency needed to navigate life in a really, really tough and challenging world. Sports gives you every opportunity to experience the highest of highs and the lowest of lows and really everywhere in between. That's available to your kid every single day in practice and in games. And you get to be the one parent, Christian parent, to say, hey, at practice today, I know you may not get a lot of playing time, or I know you're struggling with your coach, or I know your teammates are frustrating you, whatever it is for them that they're wrestling with, you can change their end goal from just trying to be the best in sport, which is that's not bad. But as parents, what's available to us every day? What would it look like for you today, Hudson, to just go and I want you to encourage 3 people today. Like, let's still try to give your best, do all these things, but on the car ride home, I want you to tell me the 3 kids that you encourage today. Like, however much I have invested into the youth football program at our kids' school, whether it's $100 or $1,000, if my kids are learning how to encourage other people and look out for those on the margins and move towards the people who are broken and left out and cussed out and all those things in sport, it's a worthwhile investment for me, because they can take that and apply it to the rest of their life. But they learn it through sports, and it's dependent on me to teach it. I can't outsource that type of teaching to the public school system. I can't outsource it to travel sports. Maybe one day we'll get lucky and have a coach who shares the same Christian values we do when it comes to imparting character and virtue above wins and stats. That hasn't happened yet, but it's ultimately my responsibility.
Well, and we... Let's say this too, and I love what Brian just said. I mean, we totally empathize with that feeling of we'll just pull them out. But again, then which aspect of culture are we going to let them be a part of that's not dark? I mean, youth sports is kind of magnified right now, but anywhere else that you place your kids, they're going to have to learn to navigate brokenness and darkness and the spirit of the power of this age, again, to kind of use biblical language. We have to learn to be in the world, but not of the world. That's the journey we're all on. And so as much as I want to protect them from that, and I don't want them to have to go through hard things or be exposed to, the nasty parts of culture, that's kind of what we signed up for by being alive and bringing kids into this world. So we talk about Daniel. Like we really want to model and follow in Daniel's footsteps, who was in an extremely toxic Babylonian culture. And he's trying to, with a handful of friends, he's trying to be obediently involved right in the midst of this nasty culture that's totally opposed to godly values. He doesn't escape from it and just say, we're going to check out and just have our own little holy huddle over here. They don't get swept up in it and act just like everybody else, but they kind of dig their heels in and lock arms together and say, in the midst of our own brokenness, we're going to try to be different and look like a different kingdom in our little corner of the world. That's big language, but that's what we think.
Yeah.
We're excited about. What does that mean then for us in our little corner of the youth sport world? We could make a difference there.
Absolutely. It is that mindset shift. And we say it all the time here at Empowered Homes, that parents are the primary faith trainers, they're the primary influencers. And so much of what we do in our society is outsourced these days, but that is not something that can be outsourced. And so to shift a mindset and go, okay, this is an opportunity for us, and to know what's best for your family, and there's like that pendulum swing of like, well, you can be over involved and you can be sucked in, and you're running in 500 different ways and your family is exhausted. And so, being able to address that, but then also on the other end of not going, okay, well, we're just not going to engage at all because, we're out. We can't do that. And so I love that you address that, and I think we all have stories of bad behavior and sideline, faux pas and all the things where we've been embarrassed. Maybe we've embarrassed ourselves, whatever it is. But let's talk about some parenting wins, because you've been working with parents and you've been working with athletes for so many years. And so I want to talk about, like, how have you seen the principles that come from your book in Away Game? How have you seen that work in maybe a specific parent's life or a family's life, where you've watched them actually start to take inventory, and then it's actually proven to show that there's like a transformation for spiritual health and a growth in their family? Like, let's give some encouragement and a win for parents to see.
That's good, Megan. And I want to say this even to set it up. It seems like there's almost 2 parts to this. One part is for us as parents to remove pressure. I feel like that's one thing that Brian and I are always talking about. How do we remove pressure instead of adding pressure? And then even more proactively in the midst of that, then how do we ask questions or or look for ways to actually pay attention to the spiritual side of their development and not just the skill side. So we're still doing skill side, but how do we also look for the spiritual side? So removing pressure and looking for opportunities to develop the spirit side. Brian, what's the story that you're thinking of?
Yeah, I'll share two quick stories. And before that too, like the book released in January, we're really hoping that we'll see more and more stories pour in as not just families, but communities try to live this out purposefully together. I'll share just a couple stories from our own family, which will hopefully, put some practicality on the table. One of the big values in our family is gratitude. So over the years coaching my kids' football teams, I've made it a point to at the end of every single game, the refs kind of run off the field quickly. I tell my entire team, go chase down the refs and shake their hands, look them in the eye, and thank them for reffing. So from third, fourth, fifth, and sixth graders, I've taught my teams to do that. Now my kids and the ones that I've coached are freshmen in high school, and they, not just my own kids, but the ones that I've coached, they still do that in games. There's 40 kids on the team, and I'll see 6 or 7 of them after the game go and run down the referee and shake their hand. Is that like massive spiritual transformation? I don't know, but it is teaching them what does it look like to show gratitude and dignity to people who just often do a thankless job. So that's one example of how I think that has worked. One that I am really hoping will work. This is a new, Ed and I have a new one every single week. So Ed, this is from Saturday. My youngest, 10 years old, Judah, made a big mistake in the football game. He's in 5th grade. He fumbled the punt. Other team recovered. His team still won by a lot, but his coach reamed him out, chucked his hat on the field, screaming at him. A bunch of the other kids were screaming at him too. And I could just tell, on the sideline, he's crying. He's got another kid who's got his arm around him. He just he made a mistake, and the coaches reamed him out for it. What does that look like? This is an opportunity then for me as a dad. The rest of the weekend is, buddy, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. It's okay. I'm not mad at you. I'm so proud that you didn't just watch the ball bounce. You tried to go get it. Keep trying to get it. Sometimes you'll grab it. Other times you're going to fumble. That's okay. Beyond sports, I want to be the contrast for my kid. So he's learning from sports right now. When I make a mistake, I get yelled at. Hopefully, he's not learning that from his dad. Hopefully, he knows when I screw up, not just in sport or in life, I know I can go to my dad because I've learned that through sports. He seems pretty okay when I make mistakes. That is part of the process. So, man, I hope he lives a life free of not looking at things on the internet that he shouldn't. But I want him to know if he does later in life, he's going to know he can talk about that stuff with dad, who's not going to rage against him just because he made a mistake. Hopefully he's learning that just through fumbling a punt. I don't know. Come back to me in 5 years and we'll see.
That's awesome. That's
there's so many opportunities for that because you mess up a lot, especially when you're learning in 5th grade. Again, it almost needs to make us angry that this is happening. There probably need to be more confrontations with guys that are throwing their hats at 5th graders.
Yeah.
Okay, but maybe that's a different podcast. That we just let it go. We just let that go. That's normal and to be accepted today. And that's why it's become so toxic. You're asking for examples. I just had a conversation with a dad the other day. His daughter is actually now, she plays at Notre Dame. She's a soccer player at Notre Dame. And I had lunch with him the other day, and we were just kind of talking about what the last 7-8 years had looked like for him with her. And he was a high level athlete. He was actually a hockey player in college. And I was kind of exploring what was the pressure that maybe he and his wife created around his kids, because they're all studs actually. And he said, Ed, I made a very conscious decision to let them chart their own course through sports and really didn't put pressure on them at all. And just in the course of exploring it, he didn't necessarily go after the best team for them to be on when it came to travel sports. He kept asking them what was going to be help them have the most fun. You can't, that seems like such a radical idea now, that's so far down the list for most of us as parents. But where do you think you'll have the most fun? Was one of his questions. And what's going to be the most sane for you as a person and us as a family when it comes to traveling to these different places? And he really let her have some ownership of that, and didn't force it. And it just turned out that she ended up being amazing in the way she progressed, in the way she was physically skilled, and the way she was mentally wired for it. But he said, I really haven't had to change hardly anything from what we did 8 years ago. I'm just there to be her dad and to be present. And just exactly what Brian just said. And I about pushed back from the table because you just don't hear that kind of talk. So that was just another example of what it can look like to do it well. And what we talked about after that is I asked him kind of what was his own internal process that allowed him to be free to do that. And we had just a good man-to-man talk about some of his own demons, so to speak, that he needed to deal with and not let affect the way he wasn't going to project himself onto his kid's sport experience. He had to make a commitment to do that and work on himself first so he could be fully present as dad. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And, I love all those examples. And I'm just thinking about my own, coaching journeys with my kids and then just sports and all that. And here's a reality. I've blown it as a coach. I messed up, but I've always tried to go back to my kids, even not just my kids, but my boys on the team and make amends of those things with them. And that there's power in that as a coach as well.
Absolutely.
It just shows some humility with them, and it shows that, we're human. We want to win. Like, you play sports, it's not just to win the game. There's so much more, but we're competitive, and you have that drive, and there's part of those elements. This last Saturday, I have a great relationship with our head coach of our football team, and one of our boys just completely missed the tackle, just let the kid run by him. And it was like you said, throwing the hat, and he was getting mad and fired up. And I put my arm, literally picked up the coach, and I said, "Hey, buddy, he's 8." And it was like I'm holding him with one arm because he's a little guy. I'm a big guy, and I could feel him just melt a little bit and kind of calm down. And so it was an easy win for our team, but de-escalating those situations and having that, man, you guys have got some incredible reviews of this book from Dan Orlovsky, Mike Singletary, Dan Wood, Kim Anthony, Dave Will, some pretty prolific athletes. Not that you need more credibility, but we are super excited to get this book in the hands of Christian parents, even parents who are have little babies. And I think those parents who have kids going, man, I can't wait for T-ball. They need this now,
Start early. I was just thinking about, my husband played baseball, I played softball, and there could have been this pressure for our kid to be like, you have to play baseball. Like, this is our life, And so starting early and going, okay, I'm going to address myself first. I'm going to be honest with myself first. And then we're going to walk into this fun youth sport journey.
Yeah. So good. So our listeners, where can they grab a copy of it? Everywhere? Is this?
Yeah, it really is out there everywhere. Yeah. And man, I love the way you're saying it. The book is full of our own mistakes in the process. It's not this, idealistic view of things. Like, we get it, but we think with just actually really some simple adjustments, we can have more fun in the process. And our kids definitely will, especially if we'll do it in community with other believers. That's just kind of the card we've been playing. Like, get with some other people and have some conversations around this book. This book isn't the final word about any of this.
Yeah.
Some of it won't work with your kids, but it'll give you language to start thinking through how might it look different in our corner of the woods, in Texas, or wherever you're at in the country.
Yeah. Brian, Ed, so grateful for your work in this and putting this together. Those of you listening, I'm just thinking too, Meghan, of, ministry leaders who may have a dad's group. If your children are student ministry and you got a group of dads, man, what a great thing to put in their hands. Maybe they can go through it together and help each other. So many ways to use this resource. And again, as Empowered Homes, like, we want to get great resources in your hands so that you can win at home. And this is definitely one of them. And Meg, we're actually, guys, hopefully it's okay. We're going to give this book away to someone on Instagram, that if you're catching this on Instagram or YouTube and you comment, we will give this away to one random person on our socials, and would love to if you want to win this, that's all you got to do. You got to comment on YouTube or Instagram, and we would love to get this in your hands. But for everyone else, go buy a copy and support these guys and what they're doing. So grateful for y'all's time. Thank you. If there's a listener like, man, I really want to connect with these guys, is there a way for them to get a hold of y'all?
Yeah, just go right to thechristianathlete.com. Ed and I both do a lot of our writing there. I own that website, so our contact info is on there. Just an easy way to get in touch with us.
Man. Well, thank y'all. Been an incredible conversation. We love sports. I love sports.
So passionate.
Literally, today's game day for my oldest, and I'm wearing a polo with his number on it right now. And it's a part of our culture. God. Yeah, part of our culture that, as Christian parents, we need to navigate well for the sake of our kids. So thank you guys so much. If you're listening, you want more resources on sports and discipling your athlete, we got a ton of great things on empoweredhomes.org.